you did exactly what you wanted to do against UMass, which, I mean, you can't. It's a simple thing, but there's plenty of times you know that was Mark. You see those games where it's 30-10 and it's just ugly and you don't feel good about it. So, I'd much rather come out against the UMass and do what they did, win 63-0 and just completely dominate than the alternative. But I think what probably the most important thing about the UMass game is not just they made it out of it healthy, but they had the bye week the week before. So you're very well rested going to Columbus. Your starters have not had to put a lot of mileage on their bodies the last 2 weeks. I mean, you had your bye week and then you had UMass. I think defensively, no one played more than 30 snaps this past Saturday. So that's the big thing to me that comes out of that UMass game is you are going to be very well rested and very healthy when you go to Columbus on Saturday.
Ohio State has won, 10 of 11. They've won 6 straight. Now, over the last, 2019, 20, 21, 22. So the last 4 have been very similar in this way. They've come in different shapes and sizes, of course, like any series, but the end result has been competitive game, not down to the wire. Ohio State's been decidedly better, but not by a large extent, not a blowout, but they've separated themselves at some point in the game to win all those games by between 10 and 15 points.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, you look at the series and you look at that run they had from 16 through 18. I mean, just 3 of the best college football games you were ever going to watch, even if 2 of them were heartbreaking losses for Penn State. They were tremendous football games. And, the last 4 years, you've seen a little bit of that talent difference there where, like you said, it was close. It was competitive. Penn State has led in the fourth quarter in 2 of those 4, but just couldn't finish it off. And you wind up with those double-digit losses. And, I mean, you look at last year, it was the JTT game. He had 2 interceptions, ran 1 back for a score, tipped another pass that got picked off. Like you could argue he single-handedly won that game for the Buckeyes. And, you look at this year, and if you're a Penn State fan looking for reasons for confidence, one of the reasons I'm the most confident I've been in Penn State playing against Ohio State in a very long time is you look at the Ohio State defense, and yeah, JTT is still there, but he hasn't done what you've expected this year. But you look at the Penn State defense, and it's like, okay, there's Chop Robinson, there's Denai Dennis Sutton, there's Adiza Isaac, there's Abdul Carter. You feel like the Penn State defense has those guys who can take this game over in the fourth quarter if need be, has those guys who can make Kyle McCord's life miserable in the fourth quarter if, the Buckeyes are trying to mount a rally to take the lead or it's a tie game or whatever it is. And, I said coming into the season that one of the things that I felt was going to make this Penn State team different and better than what we've seen the last handful of years, even going back to when they won the Big Ten in 2016, is they have those true game-changing playmakers all over this defense, which is something they haven't had in the past and is something that has cost them in games like the Ohio State game in the past. This year they have that. I know as a Penn State fan, it's difficult to say, man, if they have a lead in the fourth quarter against Ohio State, I'll be confident. Because, I mean, you go back to 2017, they've lost every time since then. And in 4 of those games, Penn State's led in the fourth quarter. But this year, I think it's different for that reason. You have your game-changing guys on defense who can flip this thing. And I will say, I think if Penn State wins on Saturday, 3:45, 4 o'clock Saturday afternoon, when people start to debrief this thing, they're going to say, man, Penn State's defensive line just took this game over and pretty much won it for them.
Drew Aller has had, I believe, 2 starts on the road. They haven't been the most scintillating. I don't know if that's just a coincidence because the 2 defenses that he has faced have not necessarily been the best defenses. Illinois was supposed to be and was last year, but not this year. And Northwestern is Northwestern. The West Virginia defense might be the best defense Aller has faced thus far. And so his numbers have dropped on the road. And now he's going to face a true road environment like Kyle McCord faced at Notre Dame. This is kind of like Drew Aller's baptism, in that type of environment where there's only about 5 to 10 of these in the country, and he's going to face it on Saturday.
Yeah, Drew definitely has struggled in his 2 road starts. Now, the Illinois game, I put that a little bit more of an asterisk, or whatever you want to say, because it was the first road start. It was before this Illinois team that kind of really came off the rails. And there were, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I know at least 3, if not 4, just brutal drops in that game that made his stat line look a lot worse than it actually was. Northwestern game, he'll be the first one to tell you. I'm sure they did not play good enough. But yeah, this is a big test. Defensively, I mean, he looked very good against Iowa. And Iowa defense is never easy for a young quarterback, but that was in a whiteout. That's much different than going to Columbus, of course. I think what is going to really benefit Drew is what he's done so well this year is the turnover-worthy plays haven't been there. He's not forcing throws. He's not making foolish decisions. He's not afraid to hit his check down back for 6-7 yards and take the next play. And when you're on the road, that kind of decision-making becomes so much more important, but especially on the road against the defensive caliber of Ohio State's. I think we'd both agree that the 2 strongest units in this game are both of these defenses. So, I could see a scenario where this comes down to which quarterback makes that back-breaking mistake, that back-breaking turnover in the fourth quarter. I know McCord has done a good job of avoiding that also, but Alar has not had a turnover yet in his career. I think Drew's up to like 260 pass attempts, something like that between last year and this year, has not thrown an interception, has only fumbled once, and he recovered it. So if he can continue to play that clean football, be smart with the ball, not force things, just take what the defense gives him, that's going to be needed because I think – you look at Penn State's offense, people want to talk about the explosiveness not being there. And I think this is a game where you're probably going to have to hit a couple explosive plays if you're going to win. But at the same time, this offense has gotten really good at that 4, 5, 6 yards in a cloud of dust and drain the clock and grind it out. And we've seen offenses like that give Ohio State problems in recent years. So we'll see how they plan to attack this thing, what Mike Yurcich wants to do. But I think the fact that Drew has, even in the road starts where the stats have not been nearly as good as at home, he still hasn't had those just awful mistakes, those turnovers, forcing things. He's not afraid to just take what the defense gives him and protect the ball.
Folks, we also have an excellent recruiting guy here. Penn State rivals, Marty Leap. He loves recruiting, does a great job covering the recruiting side as well. So we know that, and correct me if I'm misstating this in any way. Oh, the one thing I've got to restate, I haven't looked at the chat, but I'm guessing that if people were listening, they're jumping all over me. Yes, it went through the Rolodex as soon as I said that. Yes, Iowa is the best defense that Penn State has faced this year. I forgot about the Hawkeyes. So when you're on here talking for 30 hours a week, yeah, I sometimes say things when I had a brain freeze there on Iowa. Yes, not even close. Iowa, the best defense Penn State has faced. Okay. I was getting to the recruiting situation. Of course, Aller grew up about 90 minutes away from Columbus, and Ohio State apparently passed on him, didn't give him a real serious run. Was the same in play for McCord being a Philadelphia guy at Penn State? How close was Penn State to getting Kyle McCord?
The Drew stuff, Ohio State came in late. Penn State was his first major offer. Mike Yurcich was the first Power 5 offensive coordinator / quarterback coach to offer him. And that kind of just always resonated with Drew. Now, his recruitment was a lot different than Kyle McCord's. McCord was always on the scene. He was always the 5-star guy. When Penn State first offered Drew Allar and he first committed, he was like a mid-3-star. His spring / summer going into his senior year and his senior year, he just absolutely exploded and put it all together physically. And Ohio State offered late, I think like September or October of his senior year, but by then it was he wasn't going anywhere but Penn State. As for McCord, like I said, he'd always been on the radar. He went to St. Joe's Prep in Philly, which is a school Penn State has never recruited well. It definitely was not Penn State passing or anything. They recruited him very heavily. If I remember correctly, one of the big holdups in the McCord recruitment, why he was never overly interested in Penn State, was at the time, and Penn State has done as much this year because it doesn't fit Drew, but people who've watched Penn State knows James Franklin likes to run his quarterback. And McCord, if I remember correctly, neither he nor his dad was interested in him playing in an offense where they ran the quarterback as much as Penn State typically does. So that's kind of where things just fizzled out there, and he wound up a Buckeye. But, yeah, like I said, that was a recruitment. Penn State was always very interested in Kyle McCord. I just don't think Kyle McCord was ever overly interested in Penn State. And like I said, even though he was an in-state kid, there are a couple schools in Philadelphia that for whatever reason Penn State has just never recruited well, and St. Joe's Prep has always been one of them.
Folks, we got a Big 12 channel and an SEC channel. They just launched about a month ago. Please subscribe. Even if you hate the Big 12 and hate the SEC, if you enjoy what we do here at the Voice of College Football, understand it's all tied together. So if you go to the description section in the video, you can grab the links there and please subscribe. Marty Leap is here from Penn State Rivals. Marty, we talked about this several times during the season in regards to Penn State's running game. They got the two high-quality backs. They're coming off great freshman years into the sophomore years. You just expect, okay, they're going to continue to ascend, and then the offensive line's supposed to be better, and then not getting the explosive plays that we counted on. Ohio State in a similar boat with a stack of 4- and 5-star running backs that aren't getting the kind of push up front that they need. Travion Henderson's now hobbled. Mayan Williams isn't playing. Chip Tranum left the game last week for Ohio State after he was just clocked by a Purdue defender. And then they had to dust off Dallin Hayden, who I think is the best back of the lot, and get him going. So I would not be surprised if the team that runs the ball the best in this game is, with all the talk about outside receivers and the two young quarterbacks and all that, that the team that can finally get it going on the ground can be the team that comes up with the most points.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all. And, they're very similar. I have it up in front of me. Penn State's averaging 4.6 yards per rush this year. Ohio State's averaging 4.3. So, not terrible numbers, but when you're Penn State and you're Ohio State and you have these running backs you just listed, you expect more than that. So I won't be surprised at all if that's the case. Now, I will say, I think that is something that fits Penn State better. I think Penn State's more built to play that way right now. I also think if you look at the matchup in the trenches, I think Penn State's defensive line has a significant advantage over Ohio State's offensive line, more than Ohio State's D-line has over Penn State's O-line. So I think if that's what this game comes down to, I don't think Penn State would mind that at all. Because let's be honest with the Ohio State offense, Marvin Harrison's going to get hits. You're not going to stop him. As a defense, your goal's got to be to contain him. Don't let him be popping 130, 40-yard catch after another, because he's going to get a few. The kid's too talented not to. But I think the way Penn State's defense is built, they've got the secondary that can contain him, at least as much as you can contain a receiver that good. And I'm with you. If it could come down to who runs the ball better on Saturday, and again, it's kind of wild to say in a game between Penn State and Ohio State, but I would feel that Penn State would take that, because I think if this comes down to which team runs the ball better, there's a very good chance that Penn State's the team is going to be able to do that.
One of the things that bottled up the Ohio State passing game early in the season wasn't necessarily that there was a pass rush that was getting to McCord super, super effectively, or that the opposing defensive backs were doing that great of a job in coverage. But when you've got an inexperienced quarterback and he's trying to get the ball out of his hands, well, you take great receivers and you give them less time to get downfield and gain separation, and they're catching a bunch of 5- and 7-yard passes. Well, they're still great receivers, but you've limited their advantage over who's covering them and the coverage in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think that, again, that's something I'll be curious to see Saturday, because I'm sure, knowing the way Manny Diaz and Penn State want to run their defense, you're not going to see Kalen King just shadow Marvin Harrison Jr. like people would expect. Last year, Joey Porter Jr. did not do it. King is going to play his field corner spot, and Johnny Dixon's going to be the boundary corner, and Daquan Hardy's going to be in the nickel, and wherever Harrison lines up, that's who's going to take him. So I could see Ohio State, trying to go that route of trying to exploit, hey, he's not on Kalen King this play, let's try and get the ball to him, or whoever, Emeka Ibuka, if he's in the slot lined up on Daquan Hardy, whatever it may be. But now, again, Penn State, and those are 3 NFL caliber cornerbacks. So I think that's going to be a really fun matchup to watch, especially if Ibuka is healthy. Watching him and Harrison Jr. and Julian Fleming, another local guy for Penn State fans, going up against these corners is going to be a great battle. But I will be very curious to see, because Ryan Day in the past, including games against Penn State, we've seen where he gets that way with the, hey, quick hitters, because, and especially with these tackles, which I think even the most diehard Ohio State fan will tell you, these offensive tackles are just not up to snuff for what you expect at Ohio State. They could have a very long day against this Penn State pass rush. And I don't remember if it was I think it was the 2018 game where Penn State blew a fourth quarter lead. That was part of it. They couldn't block Penn State. So Ryan Day just started going screens and quick hitters and, hey, get my athletes in space and let them make plays, and they made plays. So I will be interested to see if we see some of that again on Saturday, because I think that's a real possibility, and that's one way I could see Day trying to counter what should be a very effective Penn State pass rush.
Marty Lee, Penn State Rivals. You see his Twitter handle right there. You know how to get to Penn State Rivals and check out Marty's work right there. Before we let you go, Marty, any parting shots, anything else on this one?
No, I will say that I haven't made a final decision yet what I'm going to predict for Saturday. I have not predicted Penn State to beat Ohio State since 2017. And this is the closest I've ever been to doing it. Some of it is just feeling between the fact that you're going to have Drew Lar for another year, but you have the quarterback. Most importantly, you have the defense. This defense is elite, and you're going to lose a lot of this defense after this year. In terms of beating Ohio State, trying to win the Big Ten, get to the playoff, like if you're ever going to do it, this has to be the year because of this defense. I don't know. By the end of the week, I'll probably wind up picking Penn State and then regretting it and feeling terrified about it. But I fully expect this to be another just classic between these two teams. Two of the best teams in the country, two of the best teams in the Big Ten. It should be an absolute, just tremendous college football game. Anyone who loves college football should strap in and be ready for 3.5 hours of just great football on Saturday afternoon.
Absolutely. And not the type game where you're like, okay, well, this is going to be a grinded out affair, or this is just going to be blown coverages all over the place and just receivers flying down the field constantly, 52-48. It's going to be what I enjoy is a good mix of great offense, but it's so challenged by great defense that the passing has to be crisp, tight windows, good tackling, hard hit. It's all there. For anyone, whatever style you like, you're going to see all of it.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing. You very rarely find a football game that's great offense and great defense. You got Mike Yurcich against Jim Knowles, Ryan Day against Manny Diaz. You've got four of the best minds in the sport when it comes to football. When it comes to offense and defense, I'm with you. This is going to be a game that's going to have a little bit of everything and have it all at a high level, and it should be great.
Yeah, it's going to be like watching an NFL game, 2 or 3 years or a year before the guys are actually in the NFL.
Yeah, it really will, because just look at these rosters, look at these defenses, look at these offenses. A lot of these guys are going to be making a lot of money on Sundays for a long time. So yeah, it should just be an absolute great college football game.